Go into your room, that's right. Sit on that fat of yours and do nothing but listen to...
Since we're talking about mastering and what makes a good record, a great sounding record, you should check out the third floor listening room. One of the complaints about last year was there wasn't any vinyl going on. So now we have vinyl here, and we'd like you to take advantage of it. Michael Fremer is one of the leading journalists covering high-quality audio, especially on vinyl. He's a vinyl evangelist. And I couldn't think of a better person to actually talk to our panel here, our esteemed panel on mastering and lathe cutting.
Thank you very much. So let me just get my computer open here. I'm running a little late in life right now because I was at an Ortophone in Denmark yesterday, and it's taking me a little time to get everything organized here, so wait 1 second. After your session. Okay, so mastering vinyl. We know two things when we go online and we look up vinyl. We know the experts tell us you can have no bass on records, none. No dynamic range on records. It all has to be cut. And there's so much stupidity out there. I know you all know better, but it's out there. So now we're going to talk to the people who know everything about this subject. And we have 4 experts here. Now on the end we have Lori Hines, who's not an expert. She's not a cutting engineer, but she's involved in something that's equally important, and that's plating. Plating is as important as mastering, in my opinion. I've heard the same lacquer cut plated in America and overseas years ago, and the records sound completely different. So it's a key part of the whole process, which we'll talk about that. Now, on this side, we have Scott Hull, who's at Masterdisk. Scott Hull is a 35-year veteran mastering engineer and owner of Masterdisk Studio. These all came from these people. They gave me their description, so I'm just, I toned it down a little bit because it was a little hyped up. I want them to. He's widely regarded as an expert in vinyl mastering. Since starting his career in 1983, Scott has mastered hit records and classic albums for an incredible cross-section of legendary artists, including Sting, Dave Matthews, Steely Dan, John Mayer, and Herbie Hancock. The experience of mastering thousands of albums has given Scott a deep field of reference. He often refers to the unique perspective that a great mastering engineer can bring to a record. Skill, talent, sensitivity, experience, it sounds like a sex tape, and passion for music. These are the reasons artists from all over the world trust their music to Scott. Clint Holley will need music. Clint says he started collecting music at age 12 after getting a box of his grandparents' 45 RPM singles. His favorites were Lefty Frizzell's Always Late With Your Kisses, the Everly Brothers' Kathy's Clown, and Petula Clark's Downtown. His parents were avid flea market shoppers and took him on an early morning trip around Ohio. As a young teen with some money from cutting lawns and babysitting, he saw vinyl records going out of fashion as CDs became the dominant format. People were selling records for 10 to 25 cents and armed with a well-worn copy of the Rolling Stones record guide. Holley developed a taste for Neil Young, Merle Haggard, and just about anything else he could find. In his early 20s, he dabbled as a songwriter and learned the art of recording on a Tascam Porta 5 multi-track cassette recorder. He became a live sound engineer and for the next decade developed his audio skills. In 2008, he met Cleveland-based God Groove's Vince Sluzars, and the two went to see a cutting lathe guy at Suma Recording in Northeast Ohio. Suma turned down Vince's offer to work with God Groove, after which Holley's wife suggested he obtain a cutting machine of his own. That's the wife we all want to have.
She regrets that now.
Holley spent a year of driving around the country looking and learning about mastering lathes, and on one trip he met Albert Grundy, who sold him his first VMS 70 lathe and became his mentor. Mentoring is good. 4 months after picking up his first lathe, he had taught himself how to cut a master recording. A year after that, he purchased a second lathe from a studio in the Netherlands. Since then, Holley and his partner Dave Polster have cut about 10,000 albums, from the grungiest noise records to a beautifully restored Miles Davis 10-inch reissue. They are proud of every disc they cut, and that is why they are called well-made music. Now, Jeff Powell, Takeout Vinyl. Jeff has been recording, mixing, and producing records for more than 30 years, working with the who's who of musical legends, from Bob Dylan and B.B. King to Glenn Johns and Eddie Kramer. From 89 to 97, Powell served as assistant engineer, then engineering mixer, and finally producer at Memphis' legendary Arden Studios. Since then, he's been working independently. In the fall of 2015, this is great, he moved into Sam Phillips Recording Services and set up his Neumann VMS 70 lathe. Sam Phillips Recording Service is a beautiful historic studio that has been working steadily since 1959. Powell's mastering room is in what used to be the control room of Studio B. He redesigned it for his vinyl mastering studio, and it sounds great, and it is the perfect spot. He's also been gearing up to do lathe sessions lately, and he says he's having a great time with that. We call that direct-to-disc recordings, which are incredible sounding. Some of his other credits include working with the late Tom Dowd, as well as recording artists Big Star, the Dave Matthews Band, the Bottle Rocket, Stevie Ray Vaughan, the Carolina Drops, which are great, Lucinda Williams, Ryan Adams, and many others. He's cut lacquers for the Afghan Wigs, the Black Keys, Daft Punk, Al Green, Irma Thomas, and many others. Now, Mandy Parnell is not here. I don't know what happened, but she's not here, so we'll have to soldier on without her. So first of all, you've all been doing this a long time. And I'm sure you're getting a lot of files in. What percentage of what you get is tape, and what percentage is files at this point?
For disc cutting, we get very few tape masters. Percentage is probably 85 to 90% digital files. Fortunately, more often we're getting HD vinyl. HD wave files, 24-bit, 96K and up. Occasional requests for cutting from DSD files directly, but the occasion for analog masters are usually the people, for me, that have decided to make the entire process analog. They've recorded analog multi, mixed analog, are going to master direct from the analog master tapes. So that's a special breed.
Is that true of everybody down the line?
Yeah, we do very few tape cuts. A lot of historic releases now we're doing from 192 24-bit files. Although I do have a request from a guy right now to cut from a cassette, so we'll see how that one goes.
Yeah, and I don't have a transfer deck, so I do get files that have been transferred before they get to me in high resolution, but I get zeroed in that.
Okay, so obviously that doesn't affect you, Laura. You'll plate whatever they send. Okay, now
I'm downstream.
Okay, now a lot of young bands are getting back into vinyl, and a lot of these engineers who are mixing and preparing these files for you guys don't understand what's necessary in a file for cutting a lacquer. So what is different about preparing a file for a lacquer as opposed to just putting it on the internets?
Well, there's quite a bit written about how to prepare a master for disc mastering, and I think as one general statement, I think the mix engineers are kind of overdoing it. What I usually recommend is that they look to the way music sounded in the 70s and early 80s before digital, and look at the way those masters were prepared, because that's ideal. That's actually what needs to happen. In very specific terms, I'm sure that will be echoed with the others. No more peak limiting than absolutely necessary. That even better. No peak limiting at all. And be careful about excessive sibilance and phased bass issues, which are widely talked about on the internet. But I think sometimes it's not just you can't have sibilance or you can't have phased bass. You have to be able to discriminate the difference. And really, only somebody, in my opinion, really only somebody that's cutting can really tell the difference between something that's going to be a problem or not.
Do you guys have de-essers for your system if necessary?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Probably the two biggest things that we always work on is the high end and the low end. And I always tell people, if you follow the rules of good mixing and mastering, you're already 95% there, because that's what you're going to get. You're going to put your kick drum in the middle, you're going to put your bass in the middle, and you're not going to use cheap Chinese mics that blow out somebody's S's on their vocal track. And we're problem solvers. When the master comes to us, we listen to it critically, and we know, or have listened to different cartridges, whatever, and we solve those problems that we see coming down the pike. So do what you do it well, give it to us, and we'll either give you feedback. This is all a collaboration. We're not the end-all, be-all. But if you give us a good master, you're going to get a good record. It's kind of a crap in, crap out situation. If you give us crap, it's going to sound like crap on a record. It's not a magic bullet that's going to make your music sweet just because it's on vinyl.
Yeah, I say what we do a lot of the times is actually unmastering. Because the files that you get, so many, it's the limiting, like Scott said, is the biggest problem sometimes. And there's no way to unlimit it. So, I mean, as a mixer too, I try to advise people as soon as I can talk to them. But a lot of modern engineers, they won't even give their client an unlimited version to take home and listen to. While like, hey, can you burn me a CD so I can take it home or listen in my car, what have you? They're afraid to even give them that not limited to death because it's not as loud. And they'll put it in their car and they're like, it's weak, it's not as loud. So that the fear of that, I think, is a big problem that we have to deal with.
So I don't understand why, if you're making a record, if you're making something for iTunes, or if you're making something for the radio, or for an iPod or something, and you want it to be loud, okay, but if you're making it for a record, the person buying that record doesn't have to worry that it's not going to sound good on the radio, or it's going to be lower in volume than the radio. So why do they do that?
I try to advise against it all the time. I have a good example, real quick, of a punk rock label that I do a lot of cutting for, and it's really easy to understand. So this record was originally released in the early 80s, I believe, and it was cut at somewhere, the level was around -2 BU, probably on average, so it was a loud record. And they wanted it reissued, and the files they gave me had been extremely limited, and it was the hi-hat. And it was so loud, I actually could send it back to them and say, this is why I can't cut it any hotter than this, because it blows the circuit breaker on my lathe. It's that much. And all you hear is shh the whole time. But on the other one that was louder, it was just in the mix. And so all that limiting is what killed it.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, even with quality engineers, of the dynamic interaction with the lathe. If you're talking about a side that's about 20-something minutes long, which a typical album would be, if you compress the audio more or limit the audio more, you've raised the average level, which causes each groove, every single groove on the record, to be wider and deeper and use up more space, which means I have to reduce the level to make it fit on a record. It's a bit of a circular mind puzzle, but once you actually put the music on the record, on the lathe, and watch to see what the lathe is doing, you can see what the problem is. So we try to explain one more thing about that. When you compress everything down and then have to lower the level, your peak level is actually quite low. But if you left the dynamic range where your peaks were high and your lows were kind of low, I can actually raise the level, have a peak level on that disc that's much louder, and but still have an average level that allows me to use up the space on the disc.
And that's going to make a better sounding record.
But that's what made the records prior to peak limiting, digital mastering sound great. That's why they sounded good on vinyl.
And that's one of the things that Little Steven was talking about, how the records before the 70s, or around that period of time, sounded so great. We have to get back to that quality. It's doable for the engineers if they understood what they're sending you and why what they're sending you is not good.
Sure, and use your volume knob.
Yeah, exactly. But that puts a stress on your amplifier because it's turning on. That's good.
There's a larger machine that's making it happen, though. The approval process goes through the band, or goes to an A&R person, or goes someone to the label that doesn't understand this.
That's understanding what the chain is the problem.
We all have to educate our clients on a daily basis of what these issues are. And we're oftentimes just pushed up against the wall. We ask for what we think needs to change, and how often are we just told no? You're going to
Quite a bit.
A version.
So Lori, I want to talk about plating for a second, because sometimes we hear stories, or I hear stories, we sent our lacquer to the plating facility and the lacquer got ruined. And we had to start over again. What causes a lacquer to get ruined in the plating process?
Well, hopefully, most of the time they don't.
No, most of the time.
Because our job is obviously to take what these gentlemen do and convert the quality work there into the metal parts that can go to the pressing plant. So as I think Scott or Clint said, it's a collaboration. It's really a collaboration from the point that the music gets handed to one of these gentlemen or other cutting engineers all the way through us into the test pressing plant or to the pressing plant. What can happen though is obviously human error. There can be something in your system that may be out of kilter, and maybe it hasn't been tested for some reason, or we haven't done preventative maintenance. There's a multitude, I think, of things that can go wrong at any step along the way in making a vinyl record. And we were just speaking of it before we came up here, and the parts get touched multiple times. You have to take great care with every part, from the time that these guys pull a lacquer out of a box until the time I take the lacquer and silver it, and process it in an electroplating bath, bring it out, form it, package it, and send it to a pressing plant. The pressing plant brings it out, cleans it, prepares it to go on their press, and loading those stampers are not easy in some instances, and people have a learning curve with it, like we do with everything. But I mean, anywhere in that process, something can go wrong. We've had times where we've brought them in and we're taking the packaging off and trying to be very careful with them, but we drop it. It's happened very few times, but it has happened. Other times, maybe one of our processes, we are supposed to do 30 seconds with something and we did 45 seconds, and then we go to peel it out of the bath and we're trying to peel apart the mother from the stamper, and it's like, this isn't working. What happened? We go back, we troubleshoot, we figure out what we did. Unfortunately, we have to redo it then.
And to make a two-step record, you have to do that twice.
Yes, yes, and in that instance I just described to you, if something like that happens, then we actually have to go back to these guys and say, the mother's damaged. I don't have a master because it wasn't a 3-step process. You guys have to recut it.
That's the word we hate the most.
We all do.
Recut. And also touching on what she said too, about the collaboration part. The collaboration, I think, even starts earlier with the people who make the lacquers too. And in the last year or so, we've seen a fluctuation in the quality of that base material that is our stock and trade. I look at my partner Dave all the time, and he maybe puts a lacquer on top of a box, and I said, that's $40 in cash money right there. It's our currency. And so every one of those that we pull out of a box, we have to inspect it, we look at it, and then we have to cut on it, and then we listen. Dave and I spend hours listening to grooves with nothing in them, which is not very exciting, but it tells you so much about that base product that you're getting. And since quality has been such a big topic here, that quality starts with that product. And right now, there's very limited options for cutters in the United States and around the world.
So there's got Transco and Apollo. And
They're the same company.
They're the same company. But
MDC from Japan.
Who else?
MDC from Japan.
An MDC from Japan, which is a very hard product for us to get right now. Luckily, Tom Gross from Nipro and his crew have put together a supply chain for us to be able to get those. But before, it was like a drug deal. I had to PayPal a guy in London who would send a message to a guy in New Jersey who would box them up and like send them to me. And so for people who use 150 lacquers a month, that was not a very good supply chain for us.
Speaking of supply chain, what is the situation with getting cutting styluses?
Well, it's kind of the same. I'll let Scott talk about
Well,
that.
the two manufacturers, one comes out of, or both come shipped out of, or supplied through Transco, but we've got Adamant and the Transco, and the quality has been quite good. But there's been batches that have been a problem, and they're expensive, and so we don't stock a ton of them. So when we get through a bad batch of them, we can actually, end up being offline.
So when you say the supply chain of cutting styluses and lacquers is thin, is weak?
Just barely.
That's a charitable assessment of it right now.
And then what about the other parts of, I don't know how much you get involved in this, but you know this more than the pressing plant, but they have to take the metal part and they got to punch a hole in it, and then they got to prepare it on certain machines to get it ready to be used. And those machines are from a company in Connecticut, and the guy's like 120 years old, and he's not selling. I mean, I hear all these stories. Do you know about that end of it?
I don't know.
You don't want to know, right?
No, I don't.
Well, we know when it's not punched in the center.
Yeah.
Then we can get around record.
And that's not necessarily why a record is eccentric. Things happen on the press too, so there's a whole bunch of reasons to get involved in it.
I wanted to mention just briefly about the previous topic of damage in the parts in the plating plant. My experience goes back to the early 80s at Masterdisk plant. All we did was vinyl, and it was a different environment. I just want to remind the younger people, of a few that are here, it's very normal to have when you're making a craft product like this, to have to discard part of the product. If you were doing a carving, or if you were chiseling away something, the just natural part of the process, you'd have waste. You'd have a product that just couldn't be used. So it's really important to have great quality control. We're going to be talking about it all week, both days. But it's you got to be willing to throw out the part when it's not right. And so the communication back and forth to the plant, whether it be the pressing plant or the plating plant or us as cutting, is vital, because there are times when it needs to be cut and nobody did anything wrong. It just didn't turn out great. I always, whenever it's humanly possible, and I'm sure these guys do the same thing, we'll recut it just because we want it to be as good as it can be. We put our mark on it, our names on it, we want it to be good.
How understanding are your clients when you tell them, oh, I blew 5 lacquers to get this cut right, or something happened and I have to do it over again, and you send them a bill for all your time?
No, you don't bill it.
Get the bill.
You need it.
You need it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, we try to
Two mistakes and you're...
Yeah, we try to estimate what we think is going to happen, but no, those were the 80s. We really can't.
So you've been doing this the longest. So what's the difference between? What are the major differences between doing it now and doing it 30 years ago?
What was the entire business model then? Mastering room had a couple engineers and 1 or 2 lathes, and Masterdisk was 4 mastering rooms with 5 or 6 lathes. Sterling was double that quantity. It was the entire operation. The plating plants actually sent trucks to our door every day to pick up the lacquers, and they were processed that day or the very next morning. The quantity of parts that we made was completely different. A modern or a pop project from the 80s, we might cut 6, 8, or 10 sets of lacquers for all different parts of the world. Now it's usually 1 set, and if there's well, I'm asking a question. Answering the question wasn't asked quite yet, but we're listening with digital ears. We're listening with now comparing all of our vinyl projects compared to what digital sounds like and the perfection of digital, and it's really easy to be critical of the small inherent defects of vinyl, but we have to try to find where the line is between small inherent issues that are characteristic of vinyl and a defective part of the process. But wherever possible, when we can make those determinations without pointing fingers, I think it helps everybody.
But I would still say if you're cutting from a high-res file on a record, it's going to sound better than a CD. That's my opinion.
Almost always.
Lori Hines too.
Well, I don't disagree with the high resolution part, but we're coming up with an issue where there's noise generated, supersonic noise generated on these HD masters that the engineers don't notice, and it's causing problems for us to cut. So the resolution's a great thing, but I don't know if you guys have had to watch out for it, but we've been taking
The bit rate is more important than the top number. That's the dynamic range, so if it's 24-bit, that's what's the important.
Yeah, that's more important than
Yeah.
I think everybody knows. So, how low can you cut the vinyl record? Can you go to 20 hertz? No problem.
Yeah, who can reproduce it and hear it is the question, I guess. The machine is an incredible machine. The transducer is complex, even from 1974 or whenever an SX74 came out. It's like the equivalent of watchmaking. And right now there's about 4 people in the world that rebuild these things. And one guy is almost 100, well he's not 120, but he's in his 80s. And so for us, these kind of things are a concern. And it's great to see all these other pressing plants coming online and stuff like that. But for us, it's we're like keeping a hot rod running. And the parts are dwindling. If you have a VMS 80 cutting machine, there's how many of those were made in the first place? 30, 35 to 40? So where are your spare parts? Of those of us with VMS 70s, maybe there's 500 of them out there in the world, but everybody's scrounging parts from everywhere at this point. So it'd be nice to see a company, let's make a new lathe. I know the HD thing, presentation was just here, maybe that's a wave of the future, but for the time being and for the business model that's here right now, we could use a little relief on, we're using, all of our machines are approaching 50 years old plus, going back to, there's ones in service right now from the 50s and 40s. So that would be a big help for us too, is to find a company out there that's interested in that kind of work too.
And do you have a filter on the at the high end to prevent oscillations and burnout of your coils?
Yes.
How high do you go before you?
Well, I'll put a low pass in, depending on the material. We work on a lot of stuff like noise records and stuff like that. We also use acceleration limiters, which are built-in limiters in the Neumann amp rack that they can be destructive if you use them heavy-handed because their crossover point is somewhere where it's like 4K or something like that. So you can really crush somebody's mix with those things, but they're very helpful on sibilants and hi-hats and tamarines and all those things that you watch. We have meters on our amp rack that show the current draw through the cutter head, and when that thing starts creeping up, you feel your wallet jumping out of your pocket because to repair a cutter head is $3,000–4,000. So it's a concern for us every day working on people's stuff.
I've noticed in general our cutting levels are actually a little bit more conservative, and I think one of the issues are that we'd be out of business if we blew up the cutter head. Several $1,000s is profit for one of our operations for sometimes several months. We don't have the same kind of potential benefit as the pressing plant that does in making many copies of things. We're really just selling our time, and selling our machines rental, for that specific period. We do have to protect the equipment.
And we're also, a lot of the cutters, we kind of all know each other. We help each other out. My motor went down 2 months ago. I just came in to spin it up, and it didn't go anywhere. And I called my tech. I had 5 jobs to do. And he said, crawl under there, check the screw. I did. No, that's cool. Try this. Tried everything. He goes, your motor's blowing up. So crated up in a box. It weighed 130 pounds. I said, no, well, I've got these important jobs to cut. So I called my buddies like Clint. He's bailed me out before and just said, will you cut these for me? Or, you have a network of guys. We all kind of help each other out a lot. And, that's what saves you sometimes because you don't even, I usually let my clients know when there's a problem like that. I can't just go, yeah, it's going to be another week, dude. That's not cool.
They want it when they want it.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the talk here has been about turnaround time, so it's like, for us, being out of commission for a week means our business is gone. Because like Scott said, we get paid once for each job. We don't put the stampers on a shelf and hope that somebody comes back and hires us again. Or if they press 30,000 copies and they only did 2-step plating and they need a new master, that's fine, that's great. But by and large, we get paid once per job. So we have to eke out every cent out of each one of those jobs.
So what's the weirdest thing you guys have had to inscribe in the lead-out group of a record that you didn't want to do because it offended? No, for whatever reason, what was the weirdest thing?
A wedding proposal for me.
Was it your wedding proposal?
Yeah. No, not mine. No. If it was based on the material, she would have said no, I think. They called back and said she said yes.
A lot of references to smoking weed, and we're not opposed to scribing those at all, but there's a lot of those going around out there, a lot of 420 references, that's for us, and a lot of RIPs, memorials for people.
It hasn't been that creative lately. I'm actually kind of disappointed some of the people are not getting creative with it and just putting little number strings in the lead group. But I have been asked to cut a double groove record recently, and I did figure out how to do that again. And anybody wants to know what that's about, that's real.
How long was the side? Did you do it?
It was about 14, 15 minutes, but it was interesting because only one of the songs was different. They had a male vocalist and a female vocalist. So what this is about is you drop the needle on this record and you wouldn't know which groove was going to play. So there's some fun in that. What was it, about a week's worth of R&D went into it? About a week's worth of R&D went into figuring out how to do it.
And how long do you recommend to a client that they make a side at the maximum?
I have to listen to the music first. If I tell them something, it's going to be based on just a guess. Literally, some music I can't go beyond a 20-minute side. Just 21, 22 minutes will not be competitive. But on another program, I can put a very competitive level on and even hit 26 and 27-minute sides. But these are records that don't have a lot of energy in the bass and have a lot of quiet moments. Chamber music, for instance, that never really gets to a big climax. you can put a lot more of that on a record than you can a pop record or a punk record. So I try not to give a definite answer because I think it's misleading. Because 22 minutes might actually be too long for a certain record, a big bass record, for instance, for somebody that really has to have that bass.
I work it into my pricing, actually. I charge $50 a minute over anything 22 minutes or more. I charge an extra $50 a minute. Not as a penalty, but, and like Scott said, till you hear the music, you don't really know. And if it's just a little over, it's no big deal. But we do dummy runs, you know, on everything. So we make a whole pass in real time to see if it'll fit a lot of times. And it just takes way more time. If you get there and you're at 21 minutes by the time you hit the end of the ruler where it's going to cut the lead out groove, you got to figure out what to do. And some people, I think, just lop off more low end and just turn the volume down. I try to take as little away or trick my lathe in any way possible. Sometimes you turn down the preview just a little bit to trick it so the grooves will get a little bit closer. Then they might run into each other. So it's just more expensive, it's more hazardous to do, and it takes more time and money. So I try to cover by charging just a little bit more.
Do you get more space now because many people no longer have these automatic changes that are pick up the record at a certain point? You now cut further in and not worry about that?
No, the spec is still the same. Yeah.
Unless they're going to change the standards on the RAAA, but
I mean, do they
Technically can cut all the way into the inside of the groove, but on automatic changes,
Do you have to put? Do you have to sum the bass on a record? You know, leave the bass on one channel or the other.
depends on what you're doing. I mean, I could cut an old Beatles record with the drum kit on one side, but you also have to realize those sides were 13 minutes. I can make a groove that you can drive a truck through to compensate for any bass problems with that. If you're going to give me a 25-minute side and pan your bass keyboards to right and left, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I usually talk about this being a series of compromises, which the limiting factors, don't mean audio limiting, but the high frequency content might be your limiting factor. In other words, it might be a really short side, but it might be very bright, and we can't turn it up beyond a certain point because it'll distort. But then a different record, the limiting factor might be the length. It might be 24 minutes, and we have to turn it down, which means that we have no problem cutting the top end in that case because we've turned the level down. Then another limiting factor might be how much bass or how much out of phase bass. So automatically summing the bass is maybe this, I will employ that tool, but really only when necessary. But what I think and I don't mean to insult anybody present or not present, but some of the send it away and get it cut by factory type places will employ all of the discrimination, all of those tools without discrimination, and we'll get kind of a soft and boring sounding record.
I want to get to that point because I think a lot of artists are saving money, or labels are saving money by not getting someone who's an artist. I think what you do is artistry, and you get these files and you're taking the time to make something that's really good, whereas they'll take a file and send it to a factory, and who knows who's cutting it, and they're going to try to get it in and out as quickly as possible. And that's just foolish, because you save a little bit of money, but what you're getting is not what you sent.
Well, we work with the factory, so I'm gonna clear that up a little bit. Yeah, if you're sending it overseas, or we'll keep any whatever names out of this or whatever. But yeah, you don't want to. Every record's different, and so you don't want to use a boilerplate set of processing or whatever. Like say, I'm always going to put my elliptical EQ at 120 hertz, or I'm going to roll off. You asked where we put our roll off on the top end. It's different with every record. I mean, some records I won't use any roll off on because they sound spectacular. And I know that there's nothing, dwelling up in the, 30K range that's gonna, melt my cutter head. But, we care deeply about the product. We formed a relationship with Gotta Groove Records very early in my career, and it's what allowed my business to flourish because of that relationship, and also their relationship with quality and what they wanted out of their product, and the way they marketed the pressing plant to independent artists. We don't do a lot of major label work through Gotta Groove because it's not their thing. We do a lot of people who press 200, 300 records. So it was a learning process for us too, because you get guys that sound like they recorded a broken air conditioner, And that's what you're getting paid to cut that. And we still care about that as much as a Miles Davis record or a John Coltrane record. So it's, yeah, it is an art, and you should form a relationship, either know who's cutting it through the pressing plant, or form a relationship. And in music, as I'm sure Jeff can speak to, because he's formed many relationships with people over the years, when people latch on to somebody and form that relationship, you stick with it. And it's been very hard to, you know, dislodge people from those relationships.
Yeah, you can't overstate the communication aspect of it.
Absolutely.
The difference-
Collaboration and communication.
When you get a master that doesn't cut well, you present that information back, you got a groove,
Yes.
and that gets back to the client, and that's not the factory kind of cutting that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the guy who'll cut anything and call it good, and then blame other people for the way it sounds.
We're a little sensitive about it. We're sensitive guys.
How much aesthetic manipulation do you put in a record? If you get a file and it's just too bright for you, you think this, I gotta tone this down, not because of technical reasons, but to make it sound better to your ears. Do you get involved in that, or you try to stay out of that?
Oh, sure. My favorite thing to do is I get a lot of my work from mastering engineers, so they give me what we call pre-mastered for vinyl, right? So it comes to me, but I always prefer them not to do all of the work. You know, I guess some people build themselves as I'm going to cut it like you give it to me, just direct in. I'm not going to do anything to it. I prefer to, and I've worked with so many now that we have relationships, so they'll give it to me. If it's excessive high-end information and really loud screaming S's or something, they'll tone it down a little bit and leave me some of that to do. I found that works better than me, because when I say unmastering again, if they take it all the way down and they've eliminated the S's to where it sounds like this, I can't undo that, you know. So I like getting what we call it, getting two bites at the apple, where they'll take it, they'll do what they do to it. And if I get it and they went too far or not far enough, I'll call them, man, can you address this? So we go back and forth about that one.
That's where you need the relationship as opposed
Exactly.
to cutting it. Someone do what they don't know.
Know your cutter. Know who's cutting your record, and you should be able to talk to them.
Yeah, oftentimes we work to a certain point. There's, like we've all said, there's certain things we always work on, the low end, the high end. We take it to a certain point, and if it starts crossing some threshold where we feel like we're really aesthetically changing the vision that this person had for the record, that's when we reach out. Definitely, we say, is this okay? Do you want to hear a test cut? Do you want a reference lacquer? I mean, that's something we haven't even touched on up here yet, is like buying a reference lacquer. It seems like an upfront cost that you may not want to spend, but you get it and you get to put it on your own turntable and hear how that's going to translate. And if you're not happy with it, you make the changes then, because if you go through cutting, plating, test pressing, you're paying for all of that if you don't like the way it turns out. The end client is paying for that.
I just want to say that, you know, since I review high-end audio equipment on the other side, that what's put in those grooves, most people haven't heard. I'm telling you that every time I get an improvement in a tone arm or a cartridge, I'm hearing stuff I never heard before. I'm hearing it reproduced in a way that I never heard it before. It's, there's more in there than we're getting at even now, probably, but it's reached a point where there's insane things that can be pulled out of that record that you're not even hearing yourself. I'm telling you what's in there. It's crazy. It's an amazing format. And I think if you have time to go downstairs to the high-end audio room that Paragon set up, you might enjoy hearing some records on a system that's probably in excess of anything you might have ever heard before, and you might really enjoy the experience. So, okay, how are we doing for time? Are we doing okay? I think we have 5 more minutes. So I guess we should sum it up. Anything you would like to say to these people? Give me work.
No, it's more about only be a little cautious about what you read on the internet as far as how to everything. Ask questions. A really good mastering engineer, a really good cutting engineer should be able to take the time to explain things to you and let them help you through the process. That's the difference. That what we charge a little more for, but we will help you produce a better product.
I agree with Scott. It's you form your relationship, you form that communication, follow the good rules of mixing and mastering to start with, and you're already 95% of the way there. We're problem solvers because we do this every day. And so we can tell you that. And we work with mastering engineers who say, I don't care, just fix it. And then you have people that say like, I didn't do anything wrong, I've been doing this 25 years. We're like, well, okay. If you get the record back and you don't like it, then, you know, it's our responsibility. So form a relationship, always participate in communication, and just stop using Chinese mics.
When I was learning how to do all this, one of the best pieces of advice the guy that was teaching me was, he said, look man, it's the music and that machine, he pointed to the lathe, that's going to tell you what to do, it ain't the other way around. So that's always been burned into my head. You know, you can't just, the other day I had a record I was cutting for a client, one side was 23 minutes long, one side was 18 minutes long. You can't cut the 18-minute side as loud as you could get away with cutting it, because you can only cut the 23-minute side so loud, so the 18-minute side is going to suffer. So I did a little math and said, we pull this song off this and put this song over here, I've got 20 and 20. And he goes, man, this artist, if we do that, man, it's going to take 3 weeks and he's going to want to change everything. Just cut it out, just cut it low. So there's people that make their decisions, but I pointed out, I gave him the opportunity that I can make this 2 or 3 dB louder fairly easily if you just switch those sides. But maybe they're already down the road on their artwork.
Well, I'll tell you a story. I was at a direct-to-disc session at Air Studios. They had a symphony orchestra downstairs, and it was direct-to-disc, and they were cutting, and the guys that works watching the board or watching everything. I'm looking over at the lathe, and the vacuum stopped working. That pulls out all this highly flammable lacquer from that's been cut. And so the lacquer started circling around the label area, and it was about like a beehive. It was like that high by the time I noticed it, and I went, and the orchestra's playing, and you know, the guys have got the clock going, and it's really expensive. And the mastering engineer comes over. I was videoing this, so I made a video of it, so it's on the internet. And he goes over, and he goes, ding, and gets it away, and everything was fine. But that was,
Wow.
you don't have to deal with that kind of stuff, right?
You call that the bird's nest.
Well, you'd have that if you're doing a live session, you know.
Yeah, it will actually catch on fire and make a lot of mess.
It'll be ugly. All right, any questions from the audience? If there's no questions, it always means that we did a great job and we answered every one of your questions. That's my take on that. The other possibility is that you're bored to death, so I like to think of the first possibility. Okay, thank you very much.
The quadraphonic demo is going on right now on the 3rd floor, so definitely check that out. You want to hear something different.